Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Comic Book Radio. I'm your host, Peter Cimetti, and this is episode 58. My guest tonight is Mike Murphy. We're going to be talking about the future of indie comics, in particular, building towards that future as well. I want to ask Mike a few questions about what he's got going on. Before we get started, I want to say hi to you in the chat. We got Spicer McLeroy here. Says, thanks so much for putting all these interviews together. Oh, man. No problem. Thanks for watching them. Bear says, hey, guys. Hey, Pete. Got a tracking number for my order today. Looking forward to it. Fantastic. I hope you like it. What did you get? What did you get? Let me know. There's so many of them that come through, and then you guys always have different kinds of names that I can't really keep track of who's who and what's what and what they got. But let me know what you got. What's up, Creators Outlet? Hope you're doing well. Thanks for watching tonight. All right. I just want to say something before we start. The King Cryptid campaign crossed 22K today, so thank you guys very much. Appreciate that, man. Holy smokes. That's a big milestone for us. We got about a little over 5,000 to hit the next stretch goal. We got to do that by September 9th. And the reason so is because of the fact that that's the 60-day total prior. And what I mean is the King Cryptid campaign from last year hit 27,543. So if we can hit 27,544 by September 9th, it'll unlock another stretch goal. We will have beaten the prior campaign by $1 in that first 60 days. Let's do it. 513 backers on board. We're at $22,052 right now. All right. Hey, Cole King, what's up? How you doing? Thank you for watching tonight. Okay, without further ado, let me bring on the man of the hour here. Here's a little header. Yeah, Mike Murphy. Hey, what's up, Mike?
How's it going, man? Always a pleasure.
It's going good. I'm glad you could stop by today. How you doing?
I'm doing better. Things are getting back to normal, man. How are you?
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, I'm doing good. You keeping busy?
Very, very busy, man. Both with the work and being a family man.
Well, busy's good, because if you're not busy, you're gonna wish you were busy.
Yeah, I know. It's when you stop being busy that's when you should be concerned.
Yeah. People that always... I'm always fascinated by people who go, I'm bored.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're bored? What's that like?
I literally can't afford to be bored, man.
I haven't been bored since I was like 3.
I know.
Bear,
I'll admit I miss like a good summer vacation, like your preteen years where you just had days where you could do with whatever you want. I miss those days. That's kind of bored, but yeah, these people who are like, I'm just listless, don't know what to do with myself. I'm like, what are you doing with your life?
Yeah. No, I don't have enough time. I need
Right.
more time. I need like and I'm sure I could fill probably a 40-hour day. I need one of those. That would be nice. Bear says, got all the King Cryptids in the pre-orders for next summer and 4 issues of Blood Realm. Oh, man, thank you so much, Bear. Appreciate that. Let's see, Jake says, I've read through all the series I got from Altern and just ordered 3 more. Such fun books, Pete. Thanks for all the hard work. Man, holy smokes. Thank you, Jake. And, hey, Rick Joseph, what's up? Thank you for joining us tonight. Hey, Jim as well. What's up, Jim? And, summer vacation. That's, Summer vacation seemed like it lasted forever when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Now it's like you blink and it's gone.
What's that? What's the term? Time dilation. Like the older you get, the faster time goes.
Yeah. A whole year was an eternity. Mm-hmm. Now it's like a year. I mean, the past 3 years honestly feel just like it's still this 1 year.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, everything that we all went through collectively, it feels like we just had like a bad weekend bender.
Yeah, it's strange. It really is. It is strange. What's up, Jim? Thank you so much for becoming a member or being a member for 2 months now. Appreciate that. And JW Learning, hey, what's up? All right, so I saw something that you had posted on Twitter, X, whatever,
That thing.
Elon's hellhole.
Yeah.
Um, and then you had posted about that you were rebuilding towards the future, and it got me thinking not just about what you're doing, but in general, what's happening in indie comics and the comic industry as a whole. But I want to focus more on what you're doing in particular.
Sure.
So, can you go over a bit of what you've been through in the past couple of years in terms of the projects you guys have been doing, and then
Yeah.
also where you're planning to rebuild? 'Cause I thought it was such odd phrasing because I'm not aware of anything where something has occurred where you needed to rebuild. So
Sure.
I'm curious about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll keep it as brief as I can. So for anyone not familiar with me or Chibi Comics, we started exclusively crowdfunding our projects in late 2019, early 2020. We came out the gate with Samurai and Dinosaurs, and then we followed that up with The Gods Fear Me. Two very successful campaigns, especially for creators that basically no one knew. And so from there, we headed into Deep Well, which was our kind of Shakespearean drama Western. The elevator pitch was always what happens the day the Lone Ranger rides into Deadwood. And from there, we crowdfunded a short project called Long Shadow, which was my attempt to do a revitalization of pulp as a medium, I guess. I miss the concept of pulp, and at that time, I thought that it was just a quick and easy way to get like a burst of fiction out to our readers while they were waiting on Deep Well, which had complications due to COVID, and then those complications grew into more complications. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We're on the tail end of wrapping up Deep Well, and Deep Well and Long Shadow are going to be double fulfilling at the same time. So the reason that I kind of labeled it kind of sort of as rebuilding was, it started with COVID. People attached to Deep Well really got hit hard by it, especially our overseas people, and that kind of spiraled into a whole bunch of other issues that's led to the book being as late as it is. And again, my name and Selena's name is on the project, so I will never throw anyone under the bus. It's my responsibility. But it is what it is. The project is late, and I do my best to be held as accountable as possible for it.
When was it originally projected to go out there?
It was supposed to be, I think April or July of 2021.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're like 2.5 years, well, a little over 2 years past that.
Yeah, slightly over 2.
Yeah. So yeah, like the goal is, I'm kind of wrapping up all the stuff that went wrong with the book on my own. And once I'm completely done with that stuff, we'll get it off to Eric to letter, and then we'll get it off to the printers. So yeah, like I'm going to be launching a pre-launch page for The Gods Fear Me Part 2, and that, of course, won't even launch until everyone has their books for, Deep Well and Long Shadow. But yeah, like looking at whatever that comment was that I quote tweeted, I looked at where we were at as a company, the things that we had done right and the things that we had done wrong, and just kind of where indie comics, Comicsgate, like that whole thing, just the direction it seems to be flowing. And it's clear that heading into 2024, like we kind of have to assess all that stuff and take a fresh plan of attack when it comes to our publishing initiative.
Okay. In your estimation, where do you see that it's going?
Well, the readers, which the customers, which is what matters most to me. they're making it clear that they prefer books that are done or at least close to done before crowdfunding or just, being listed for sale on like individual companies' websites. And, as a small house, it's just my wife and I. We can't pay 100% out of pocket, but if we can get, get the train back on the tracks and do really good with the Gods Fear Me 2 and another project or two that we have planned between now and next year, that should give us enough momentum to at least by the end of next year start launching projects that are halfway completed. So instead of the whole thing of like 6 to 9 months turnaround time, maybe we can cut that down to 3 to 4 months. And hopefully that'll be a start that, again, we can build on from there.
I absolutely wish you luck in that, and I do sympathize with the readers out there that would like to see stuff come out. I mean, I'd like to see stuff come out instantaneously, but
Yeah.
I do think that it's a slippery slope because there's
Hmm.
certain people out there that are putting books out, and it's not necessarily being crowdfunded; it's a pre-order,
Right.
and those people aren't really even talking about it as a crowdfunder. They're very clearly talking about it as a pre-order, and
Right.
it's not even in terms of like the book needs to be completed. The book is basically done, and they're gathering numbers before they go to print or that kind of a thing.
Hmm.
I think that's. I'd hate to see a lot of creators put themselves in a position that they don't really need to be in terms of mismanaging uh, perhaps maybe their time and their own funds, and then they go, "Oh, the book is done,"
Right.
because then they put themselves in a catch-22 where everyone goes, "Well, then why are you crowdfunding?"
Right.
Because print cost is going to be definitely less than creation cost of the book.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it really is like it's murky waters, I think, for a lot of creators out there in terms of going forward with that, because they're going to need more marketing and a bigger platform and networking in place before they really start considering, I can piggyback onto each campaign and get a leg up on the next book. I do see that talk going around. That's why I really wanted to talk to you about that too, because it kind of concerns me. I get the concerns both ways,
Hmm.
but I'm concerned for the creators out there that maybe are not used to doing that kind of a thing, having that system in front of them, and then all of a sudden they shoot themselves in the foot in multiple ways.
Sure. I think it's also about managing expectations and also being realistic, both with your budget and the how would you refer to it as, just the size of what it is that you're trying to produce. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people jump into the deep end and try to produce like a 48-page book, and I've seen a lot of like first timers come out the gate with like a full size like 96 or 110-page graphic novel. And the only reason that we did that with Samurai, our first project, was because the book was entirely done and had been done for years. That was a book that we had produced for Archaea, and they ended up having to pass on the deal because that was right around the time that they merged with Boom.
Mm.
So, that was a thing that we just, we had kind of resigned ourselves to just, putting in like, storage, and this whole opportunity presented itself, and we were off and running from there. But when it came to like all of our future titles, the Gods Fear Me, Deep Well, these are 32-page books, and they're kind of capped at that. The Gods Fear Me 2 is going to be 40, but yeah, like anything that's an unknown book, to our audience, we're never going to start any higher than 32 pages because, again, like you have to factor in cost of labor and production costs.
Yeah, so you're tackling kind of like issue at a time, like one issue, 32 pages at a time, as opposed to putting out something like maybe an 80-page graphic novel or anything like that. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. All of our series are designed to be. This is something that I kind of cribbed from Warren Ellis in the early 2000s. Like he had this whole string of miniseries that were like 3 issues and done, and then compiled into a trade. That's kind of the approach that we're taking with, initially at least, all of our first wave of titles. So once these books hit part 3, that'll be the end of the main story, and then we can compile them into trades. And if the audience, wants to see more, there are sequel-ish ideas that we have floating for all of them.
You're right. Yeah, I'm not as worried as much for you, because you guys have been doing this for a bit, so it's not really something where you're going to be up against the kind of hurdles that maybe someone's doing this for the first or second time is going to be up against.
Sure.
But yeah, I definitely am rooting for you in terms of speeding up the production timeline, because I think we'd all like to see that kind of a thing. But there's always, as you know well, there's always variables and things you can't control.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. Turns out you shouldn't produce not only 1 but 2 books during a pandemic.
try
Who knew?
producing. Good grief, how many did we do? I
Yeah,
think we did like 12 to 20 during the
yeah,
course of
man.
that.
You were in the thick of it that whole time.
Yeah, and especially when it had first hit, and then the reaction that Diamond had, it really it triggered us down the path that we're currently on.
Right. Yeah.
And we were already in that motion anyway. But yeah, it's I have been seeing that conversation around, in terms of people believing anyway that that people want to see things done before they start crowdfunding. I mean, it should be done before you start selling it. And crowdfunding in some way is selling. I'm not
Right.
saying that it isn't, but it's a different mentality and a different process behind that. And I don't want to see a lot of people out there kind of end up confusing it. But yeah, it's tough. I get the position that you're in, and it really is difficult. For those in the chat that are listening, what are your thoughts on this too? Let us know. So moving forward with your production schedule, are all of these titles, are they treated as a mini series? Are they treated as an ongoing? How is the format for the series?
Yeah, it's basically a miniseries. Like I was saying, like each, the Gods Fear Me, Deep Well, the Red Key, which will be something down the line, hopefully next year, and like 1 or 2 others. They're all designed to be 3 issues and done. And at the end of that 3rd part, that is the end of the story. But that's not to say that if there is enough demand that we can't follow it up. Like with Deepwell, our Western, if we wrap up this entire 3-issue arc and there's a drive for it, I've already got Deepwell 1972 in my head. So yeah, like there is the possibility for sequels and continuations, but not necessarily directly tied to characters or events from the end of the 3rd issue. It is kind of a finality.
So is that just the only title in particular where it's like that, or like you've got Samurais and Dinosaurs, you've got the Gods That Fear Me, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So with Samurai, okay. I'm trying not to get too inside baseball, but this isn't anything that people don't know. So, with Chibi, like we jumped into the deep end with Comicsgate, and the few industry contacts that we did have, like those bridges were immediately burnt. And one of those burnt bridges was the artist of Samurai and Dinosaurs, even though we told him our plans for the book and our intentions. And yeah, so if there is a sequel to Samurai, it won't be he won't be involved. And yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what I can and can't do legally so as to not ruffle those feathers.
Oh, is he like a rights holder of the book?
There.
Like a co-creator?
Well, this is what's interesting. So it's one of those things where like I flat out wrote him, I think last year, and I was like, hey, look, we want to do a second printing of the book, and we're also like weighing sequel ideas with a couple other artists, but I don't want there to be any issues. And I have it in writing that he says, hey, it's your book, like full stop. You own it. You can do whatever you want with it. So I have that in writing. But because again, this was a book that was produced years and years ago between two friends without a contract. So I could, and I definitely have ideas. It's just there are some people that work in law in our family that I need to consult before we go too far with more samurai.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, you should be fine. You should be fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't want to. I don't want to give you any kind of advice in that scenario. I'm not.
I get an angry email from him, and I'm like, Peter said it was fine, man.
Yeah, yeah. Just send it to me, and I'll be like, it's fine, and that'll be it. You know.
Please, man, please. But yeah, like there's so like the Gods Fear Me is like kind of big in scope, and there's a sequel that I have in mind for it that Rossi seems really up for, and it's one of those things where it's more of an expansion of the universe than a direct sequel to the book, you know. So yeah, I'd love to get to the point where readers can experience that, because it would be as different as going from Breaking Bad to Better Call Saul.
Interesting. All right. Let's see. Spicer says, do you plan on doing any that last 50 issues? If not, what are your thoughts on the pitfalls of that scope?
Well, this was something like in the whole indie scene that we talked about, like 2 years ago, like the idea of like, can you crowdfund or self-produce like an ongoing book that comes out with any kind of regularity, right?
Totally. I'm living proof.
Yeah, you are. I never say never, but
yeah, it's not for everybody though.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a grind, man, and again, it's me and Selena, my wife and co-publisher. So if we can get to the point where like there's a slight expansion and we can bring in some other people like to share the load, maybe I'd love to have something like a preacher to my name, you know?
Yeah,
like that's always been the dream.
Key.
Yeah.
That's the key. It's about lightening that load a bit, because there's no way I could do that if I had to do everything on the book. If I had to draw it, write it, everything, there's no way.
Yeah.
It's not in the wheelhouse for me anyway in terms of that. But I find that also the deeper question is that most people aren't really, I think, answering, or at least I'm not seeing it being answered. And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's just not a lot of people out there that are making books that should be that long. Most people are not. They're setting up a plot-driven type book. It'd be the equivalent of creating 50 movies in a franchise as opposed to 50 episodes of a TV show.
Exactly.
You know, so the mindset has to be there that you're on a journey with the characters. Not that the whole point of the story is to get to the ending. You know, because if that's the point, then you have to write it in a whole different setup. So I think that's the deeper question, is how many people out there are creating a character-oriented, plot-driven, character-driven kinds of stories. You know, like superhero comics across the board have been, relatively. You know, you follow the adventures and the life of that character. But most people within the indie space, whether this is what they're acclimated to telling, or they don't think they could tell a story that is like that, whatever it may be, you got to come up with character creation, you got to come up with plot creation, you got to come up with things to keep it fresh every issue, and there's not a lot of that going on. And I think that's why we're not really seeing a lot of stories that are dedicated and pushed in that way. How do you feel about that?
I agree, man. You know, it's partially the realities of what's left of the mainstream industry, and it's partially the realities of just publishing something on your own. The idea of the ongoing monthly is kind of becoming a dinosaur. I'm sad to say. You know, I agree that ultimately when you're taking on a task like that, it's the journey, not the destination. I think the best TV shows wrap with a sense of closure, but not finality, if that makes sense. Again, like
Yeah,
not
yeah, it
to
totally makes sense.
but not to like beat a dead horse, but again, like you look at stuff like Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, like those are really solid endings, but you don't necessarily think of just the ending when you think of that show. You think of the episode like where they're stuck in the basement for the entire episode. You think of, like Saul's girlfriend getting into that car wreck like towards the end of the third season. Like you think of moments more so than like just the anticipation of getting to the ending.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of stories that are predicated on going towards, there's some kind of finality, there's some kind of ending, and we're racing towards that.
Hmm.
Most of the time, those stories end in such an unfulfilling way.
Right.
And,
Right.
when you make it that's everything, like Lost comes to mind, or
Hmm.
even Game of Thrones, where it's
Sure.
constantly like winter is coming, and the big
Right.
push is mostly towards this climactic kind of thing.
Hmm.
Once you reach that climax, though, if it's not done well, if it's not played out effectively, all of a sudden all the nice moments that were there that pulled it along are like, what the hell was all that for? I just wasted so much time.
Yeah, man. Oh, dude, Game of Thrones. I mean, not to not to turn this into a TV stream, but like Game of Thrones was so disappointing because, and like I still say this, everything that happened in that final season, like let's be honest, just the whole season, everything that happened could have worked. Like everyone does the thing of like armchair quarterbacking, like how things should have played out. I'm like, no, no, no. Like everything was fine. It just took the craft of a solid writer, and it took more time. Like if that final season had been like a full 10 episodes instead of whatever it was, like 6 or 8.
Yeah, there's a couple plot moments that were rushed and character development moments that seemed to just happen way too quickly, things like that.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone complains about like, well, I guess we're talking Game of Thrones spoilers. Everyone complains about the kid becoming king, and I'm like, no, no, no. Like with the powers and abilities that he had, like he could have totally orchestrated this entire thing because he knew he was able to project himself and see that him becoming king was the only way to maintain peace. It's just you have to work for that, and you have to show it, and you have to build towards it, not just rush to the ending.
Yeah, yeah. And it just seemed like he became the writer's device for everything.
Right.
Everything is this way because we said so. You
Yeah, to
know,
the point to the point where you have Dinklage going like the power of the writer, and you're like, oh, shut up, man.
it's like the little the storyteller gets in their diatribe, their little soliloquy, to be like, just remember we have the power here.
Yeah, yeah,
It is just it's so heavy handed, yeah, and hidden hand, yeah. It was everyone was being out of character, and they felt out of character because the moments that were required and needed to develop the character to progress
right.
them to that point were not there.
Yeah,
And that's what happens a lot of time when you get to have these types of things where they are more about rushing to the ending, wrapping it up, getting to where you got to be, and then all of a sudden now your characters don't feel like people and human beings anymore with motivations and things of why they do what they do, but they feel like chess pieces, and they're just
yeah,
being moved around on the board, and that's how it is. And they've got a script, and
right.
the same thing happens obviously in comics, and especially in episodic style storytelling. If you've got it set up where you're doing it like that with this
Hmm.
long form game plan of you're getting to this ending, and it's predicated on that, and that really alone, that can be a harrowing experience because you're really setting yourself up to just tell everyone, buckle in, whatever is going to happen, we're going to get there, it's going to be worth it, and then they put their trust in you, and if it really didn't pan out, man, it could get bad, and but that's what I love about these kind of stories where you can have self-contained issues and things like that, because every single thing builds organically that world.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I agree. I mean, I don't think, especially like small press indie publishing, I don't think we have the luxury of like like what's the old story about DC, how I'm blanking on the editor's name, how he would literally like go to the newsstand and ask the kids what they liked and didn't like about Superman that month. um the modern day equivalent of that is just responding to feedback on Twitter. And I don't think we have that luxury to be able to turn on a dime when, like, to go back to the question, like, could we self-publish 50 issues of whatever or crowdfund it? If we're in the middle of that and we start getting audience feedback that, X plot line or Y character, they're just not receptive to, well, it's kind of hard in the middle of all that when we're banking on basically investor capital to just be like, okay, we're going to ditch that plot line and redirect the entire series.
That'd
Stuff
be
like that's
fun
difficult.
though.
It would, dude. Here's the thing, like my thing about if I ever get to produce like just an ongoing comic is I want to treat it like an ongoing TV show. Like I always had this idea of like setting up like roadblocks and problems for me. Like like when a show, like when an actor or an actress on a show just quits because of whatever reason, and all of a sudden they just have to like wrap up that entire like subplot. Like I always had this thing in my head of like I'm just gonna like randomly kill off a character or that character just vanishes for whatever reason. Like just to make it feel like the way that watching a TV show for like X number of years feels.
You should do that. You should do that.
Yeah,
I think honestly, and I don't want to be contrarian to the stuff you're putting out, but I think honestly that kind of stuff is missing so much from comics. I think
sure.
that's the kind of thing that made it seem so fun, was
Hmm.
because there was this engagement with the reader. There was the feedback that was kind of built into the comic. Maybe it took a couple months or a year to work into the story and bring that character back that everyone was so receptive to, because you couldn't operate on just and pivot so fast.
Yeah.
But being independent and having less bureaucracy, less red tape to cut through, you really could turn on a dime depending on how
Hmm.
you're telling your story. And
Right.
as long as you have these kinds of issues that are set up where you can tell the story, get in, get out, and there's overarching continuity, you really
Hmm.
could just do that thing and keep readers on their toes. And I think that would be so much fun. I think that's something that's really missing
I
from,
agree, man. I agree.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
just
mean,
all comics in general, because even the big corporate comics don't do so much of that nowadays because the system's so based on pre-orders, so they're already like months ahead trying
yeah.
to sell you on the issue that's coming out when you don't even have the issue that's today.
Yeah, I mean, what's weird is it almost feels like, I still try to pay attention to like what a, studio like DC is doing. Um and it almost feels like they're getting closer to our approach to, putting out books.
Absolutely.
Cuz like same thing, they'll do like a 5-part arc and just put it out as a hardcover, and it doesn't feel like the next issue of an ongoing comic book. It feels like, well, there's that volume of, like what sticks out in my head is Tinian's Batman run, because it was the last mainstream book that I bought, and it was great, but it didn't feel like an ongoing Batman comic. It just felt like, well, there's like 6 volumes of Batman.
Yeah, it loses the magic of everything the comic book medium was about for decades.
Hmm. Hmm.
Everything's like these short bursts, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but they never feel like they're connected. They never feel like these are established real individuals that are
Right.
living out their life, and you're kind of peeking in today about what's happening today with this guy.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I think like you're visiting old friends again. It just feels like here's the movie of the week.
Right.
And it's such a different mindset, and for someone maybe who wasn't quite as used to it and they become more accustomed to this sort of system.
Hmm.
I don't know if there's even a proper way to truly describe it. And I think that's why manga too is kicking the crap out of
Yeah. Yeah.
comics, because there is that flow and that feeling of you pick up the latest book and it feels like, okay, stuff is continuing, and I'm just picking up and seeing where this journey is at today. Where in comics it's like, what the hell does that mean anymore? Is there a journey even? It just is like everything is this event, and if
Right.
you're not there for the event, or the event's been played out or rehashed, or it's rebooted for the 10th time, I don't want to see a lot of indie creators go down and kind of cut off the legs of their own characters and creations because they think the way to do it would be to kind of follow and maybe build or make it better than what they're seeing the corporate version do, because the corporate side of it's lost. So you're kind of like saying, and not you, but there's people out there that are saying, well, emulate what's done at the corporate right now, but
Right.
make it better. But the thing is, it's already flawed. What's already
Right.
being done is broken and flawed, and it should be ignored entirely. Let them do what they're doing. Go back to when they were doing things correctly, and is what made comics have that magic. And what you were talking about, I mean, I would love to see that. I would love to see where you're just going in there, and you're
Mm-hmm.
just full tilt creating something that is just so engaging, where I don't know where you're going with it. And
Right.
I mean that in a good way, So you create like these characters that they're engaging, they're cool, or and they're doing something, and there's a situation within the comic, there's a conflict that's occurring, and you're building upon that world, and you've
Mm-hmm.
got every single issue, and you don't know what the hell's happening next. I'm just along for the ride. That's a great feeling, and I miss that in comics so much.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Yeah. Like where that whole idea came from is like a couple years after my wife and I like binged through Angel, the Buffy spinoff. Like we were doing like behind the scenes reading, and apparently like the actress that played Cordelia and Whedon had like this really bitter falling out because between seasons she decided to have a kid, and so she shows up filming ready for filming it for season 4, like super preggers, and it's just like, well, okay, like that happened. How do we roll that into the show now out of nowhere? Like, doing weird pivots like
Sit
that in
down,
short.
big jacket,
Well,
classic
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, and they do that with some shows. They do that with some shows, but
Film from the chest up.
but so like, oh man, like you're just dragging out like all the stuff that I haven't thought about in a few years. So here's the thing, man. When that question came up about like, could like a small independent publisher like realistically do that, the two places that my mind went was what you guys do with newsprint, and combining that with, do you remember, this is going back way more than 10 years, like do you remember Image's slimline format with Fell and Matt Fraction had a book. It
Oh
was
yeah,
him,
yeah.
where it was like I think 16 or 19 pages. It was way slimmer than a regular, floppy.
Yeah.
But like combining those two things, so like a 16 to 19 page chunk of story printed on newsprint, maybe that could keep production time down and your budgetary expenses down to where you could, if you built up enough steam and had enough issues kind of ready in the chamber, so to speak, you could maybe not monthly but bi-monthly keep it going.
I mean, yeah, you could do that. The thing is with newsprint, I do want to squash some of the myths out there.
Hmm.
Newsprint off the bat is expensive. If you're
Okay.
not printing an overall run at most of these newsprint printers, if you're not printing an overall run of 5,000 to 10,000 books, it
Hmm.
doesn't matter, you're doing it on newsprint.
Okay.
There's some of them where you can go as low as 2,000, and it's going to
Hmm.
be still, yeah, it's going to be okay. It's not going to be expensive or anything. And then you really start seeing savings at 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, especially if you're doing one book. If you're doing one book and you're sending them like 5,000 copies to print up, man, that's
Yeah.
going to be affordable.
Okay.
But if you're going in there, and let's say that like most people that are doing crowdfunding in the indie space, maybe they're printing 500 copies.
All right.
Newsprint is not going to be affordable for you. Newsprint is going to, unless you really are secure in, and this is where that kind of ongoing format might benefit someone, because if they go, well, I'm going to tell this ongoing series and I've got as many stories to tell as the readers are there for, so we get to 30, 50, 100, whatever,
Hmm.
then maybe you can go in there and confidently print 2 or 3,000 copies of your book and only maybe 500 sold, because
Okay.
then you'll have those books for the future campaigns and the future issues. You have this back issue catalog, and you'll always
Yeah.
be growing it. But for that kind of thing with the 16 pager, totally possible, but I would recommend more for people to consider the print on demand option still. That's still going to be more
Okay.
affordable. You'll
Okay.
probably spend like $500 doing a 16 pager, sending out to 200 people.
Yeah.
And, that's $500 is nothing for a print run.
Right.
And then they'll get something that's pretty decent. As opposed to seeing people really bend over backwards. Because I've talked to like over 120 something newsprint printers, and maybe
Uh,
4 in the country are affordable in
okay.
terms of a realistic amount. Some of them, they won't even touch the project unless you're printing 20,000 copies of something. Because
Oh
what
my
they
goodness.
deal with, because they deal with largely projects that are at 50K or higher, and
Hmm.
they'll go, we can make an exception if you could print 20,000 copies. And I'm like, okay, that's not going to happen.
No, son, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, yeah. So it gets incredibly affordable if you're printing, like, like if the bigger publishers went to newsprint, they'd probably cut their print costs in half.
Hmm.
But, when they're printing like so many titles, 1 or 2 million between all of them, and then they go to print on newsprint, probably cut the production costs of printing in half.
Okay.
But like in terms of a smaller publisher that's printing like 1,000 or less, or even 500 or less, definitely
Right.
print on demand would be still the option to go. But that is a good idea though with the 16 pager too. Get the
Yeah.
stories smaller, keep the
Hmm.
cost lower, and then keep the production time ramped up.
Right.
So you
Exactly.
could do that. You could do like a quarterly 16 pager.
Yeah. I mean, like I was thinking, like, okay, so we're doing 32 pages roughly, once a year with each of these projects. Well, split that in half, and like as you said, like you could do it quarterly, and just again, the more momentum builds up. Like if we're talking about an ongoing, the more momentum that builds up, the hopefully the more revenue you have to work with, and yeah, like I think it could be done. I don't know if it's in our immediate future, but you've really stuck it in my head, man.
Yeah, no, I seriously, if you do come out with a series where you're going with it, and because I don't know, maybe it's just me. I don't give a crap about getting to the end of a series.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
want a series that I'm like, you're gonna make this for forever, for as
Sure.
long as you can.
Sure.
Then I like hearing that. So
Hmm.
if you've got all these stories and characters and everything else that you want to get in there, and you've got all these ideas for plots and stories with these characters, creating essentially your own universe.
Yeah.
That's what gets me excited about comics. Getting in and out of a comic and going, okay, great. I want to see that it ends so I can just go to the next one. I'm like, well, what I love about comics is falling in love with these characters and spending
Sure.
as much time with them possible as I can.
Hmm.
It's what's different about any other medium if you really think about it. Because even TV, even though there are similarities, until the wheels fall off and it gets weird, and when it gets weird, and the audience
Hmm.
knows when it gets weird, and then it's time
It's
to
usually
wrap it up and say goodbye.
it's usually about season 7.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Usually they hit their stride about season 3 or 4, and
Hmm.
then around 7, it's like it's very rare when you hit 7, 8, 9, and you're like, wow, it's still great.
Yeah.
That's super rare.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we don't really see that a lot nowadays because I think shows are so predicated towards getting to that ending. But
Hmm.
before, when we were growing up, especially with shows like and these weren't seasons that we know them to be, because you look at like let's say Thundercats, and there's like
Hmm.
100 friggin' episodes in Thundercats, but there's only like 2 official seasons.
Right.
Because they put out so many episodes. It was like every day was an episode. Like to get to 100 episodes now, you'd be like, oh, did that show go on for like 10 or 12 years? Because everyone's doing these small seasons. But I loved seeing everything like that. I didn't want to see this kind of stuff. I wanted to see what was the next story. What was the next character coming in? Where were they going to be next? What were they going to do next? And if you do a
Sure.
story like that, if you do a series like that, man, that would be so much fun. I would love to see that.
I'll see what I can do, man. It's funny.
Just make it for me.
Yeah, I will just make it for you, sir. Yeah, what's funny is like I always reference this quote. Guillermo del Toro says, he's a glutton for entertainment, and I completely sympathize with that. Like, I see what you're saying, and I do love, like obviously, like talking about TV shows as long as I just did. Like I do love ongoing narratives, um, but I do love finality as well. Um, I love both. So basically designing our series as novels was mostly driven by budgetary expectations when we went into crowdfunding. But yeah, again, to the first part of the show and everything that I was talking about, like once we resume crowdfunding and publishing, again, if the audience will support it, like I'll do an ongoing. It'll probably be 16 pages, but I'll do it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing and you have a point with that. I don't think there's a lot of people that can go into it right away, first effort, and go,
Right,
I'm gonna do an ongoing.
right,
You have so much to learn still about
right,
storytelling, about logistics, about publishing, about just all the little things that you have no idea about. Creation at that point with a comic is like the least of your worries.
right,
It's everything
right,
else.
right.
So I don't expect anyone new coming off on the scene and doing, I'm going to tell 50 issues or whatever. But I think someone like you and many others like you that have been doing this now for a few years, where
Hmm.
you guys are a little bit more skilled and honed in on not just your storytelling prowess, but also in terms of all the other stuff. I think it would be great to see that pivot towards that old school mentality of
Sure.
episodic storytelling. And again, I mean, I bang this drum constantly, and that's why I'm putting my money where my mouth is with my series.
Hmm.
Like I've told people, it's 100 issues easily, minimum.
Right, right.
And I am there for it, and I mean it.
Hmm.
But I know a lot of people aren't necessarily in that same capacity, or they're not telling a story that way, or they're unsure how to tell a story that way because their mind is still so wrapped around a contained narrative as
Right.
opposed to the ongoing narrative. But yeah, I think it's what made comics so exciting, and I think it's what made them it made the readers on their toes, and that alone, knowing that there wasn't necessarily going to be a finality to it. So
Hmm.
the only real given was maybe the main character isn't ever going to die. They're going to
Right.
be put through the ringer, but for the most part, they're probably not going to die. And they're not going to have a sense of finality. But I mean, depending on how you're like telling the stories, what you're talking about,
Hmm.
where you're saying how you can make a certain character within, like if you're doing a team book or whatever else, like some of the side characters or whatever. At that
Right.
point, they're all kind of side characters in a way.
In a way, yeah.
Doing that to them, man, it gets my it piques my interest.
Yeah, it's just a really interesting approach that I don't think anyone has purposely set out to do. Again, when we're going back to like the 90s and 2000s with these runs that had like 150, 200 issues to them. Sure, obviously, like other characters would come in and out of the spotlight, and things would change, and setting evolution. But just the idea of like purposely putting like a roadblock in place for the sake of like shaking things up and kind of on the fly having to reinvigorate like whatever you're doing at the time with the storyline. I think writers in comics in particular kind of avoid that stuff because they hate like setting up dominoes in their head and just having someone like tip them over.
Yeah, and that's what's made it so boring.
Right.
I,
I agree.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that kind of stuff, because it really is about. It's not necessarily the roadblocks with the way that you're saying it.
Hmm.
It's about forcing yourself to become more creative.
Right.
It's about setting up obstacles not just for yourself but also for the characters, so that not just they have to be more creative, but you obviously, by making them more creative, have to be more creative and
Yeah,
come
yeah,
up.
yeah.
Like it's like the Batman 66 show, the
Hmm.
second part, and they're in the clutches of whatever and tied up, and the buzzsaw's coming, and they're like, how are they going to get out of this? That you knew they were going to get out of it. But
Right.
it was like, how are they going to get out of it? And that was the
Right.
interesting part. That's why you tuned into the second part. If it was based off of like, oh man, I want to watch Batman die,
Yeah.
but if Batman dies, there's no more Batman.
I think you've got it there. The only trick is I have to be creative enough not to fall back on the utility belt for everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, hell, someone could go and do that too. Hell, make a
I mean,
campy, get out the shark repellent spray.
right, exactly. Like at this point, I'll take it, man. With as dry as things have gotten in comics, I'll take some bat repellent
Right?
or
Yeah.
shark repellent. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's I don't know. Chat, let me know. Am I off my rocker? Should I just give up the ghost and just everyone just make these stories that have an ending and then just make like 5,000 of them and no one really develop characters fully and just go with plots only and because that's largely what you see in a plot driven kind of thing in most movies.
Well,
Now great movies have both.
sure.
Great comics have both. Stories that have character development and character driven elements and plot driven, they're
Hmm.
great. But very
Well,
few. Yeah.
well, yeah, and real quick, like I completely forgot to mention. So, sure, each of our books, is designed to be like, three parts, three arcs, beginning, middle, and end, and done. But, I did take into account everything that you're saying because, I realized, okay, realistically, we're probably going to be publishing these about once a year. So that's a huge, for the
It's a
reader,
it's a big ask. Yeah.
yeah, in real time, I'm asking a lot of people to basically hang on a cliffhanger and assume that they're going to remember everything when they pick up the next issue. So, what we do is there are time jumps between each issue. Um, some of them are bigger than others. Like in The Gods Fear Me, there's about 10 years between each issue. And with Deep Well, it's only going to be about a year or two per issue. But that does allow, because I'm a big fan of like world progression and character progression. Like I'm a big fan of like I want to see a world, in its infancy. I want to see it at the height of its popularity. I want to see it in its decline, and that goes for characters too. So in The Gods Fear Me, there's Kedzie, our android, and she meets up with like the last boy on Earth, and he's 12 in issue 1, and in issue 2 he's like 23. So I think that allows, that kind of sidesteps that in a way and like lets us get into some character growth and changing the world little by little.
Yeah. And I love that too, man. I think that's become a missed opportunity. Like in mainstream comics, whenever they did some kind of a reboot that they felt
Hmm.
that they needed to do, the only way on earth that I could have said, all right, I get it, is if now they were going to actually stick to having exactly what you were talking about, where you get a sense of time that's progressing, you get a sense of aging, you
Sure.
get it, because then you can actually have this organic passing of a mantle. The
Right.
dude's just getting old, like the Batman Beyond kind of a thing. The dude's
Yeah, yeah.
old.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, I think part of the reason why crossovers don't mean anything anymore is because it's the smaller stuff that means more. I mean, sure, you look at in the 80s when Dick went from being Robin to Nightwing, like that was huge. Like
Yeah, yeah.
that, I mean, at least for my generation of comic reader, like the idea of like you're not just leaving that persona behind, but you're adopting an entirely new one, and we're going with the assumption that you've aged into it. Like that was huge.
Yeah, yeah, and very few characters really ever did that,
Right.
and or at least really did it as well. And
Hmm.
and what I mean too by the mantle aspect also is something that's just like that, where Nightwing doesn't become Batman, but Nightwing would essentially take over for Batman, who's maybe aging out of
Right.
it. And then the next step that would come along, the Batman Beyond kind of a thing. But
Hmm.
because I hate the aspect of, because I don't think this would be realistic in terms of when you're writing a story. I don't think it would just happen. I don't think there's something where it would be like on a sports team. You don't just put on the guy's jersey that just retired and say, I'm them now.
Right. Right. Right.
Like, you don't just slap on the Wayne Gretzky jersey and go, hey, Gretz retired, I'm Gretzky now.
Right.
I'm taking
I'm,
up the mantle of Wayne Gretzky.
I'm the fridge. Like, what are you
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about?
yeah. I'm Jordan now. I wear 23.
Right. Right.
It's
Right.
like, no, you're your own person.
Yeah.
So you're your own person with your own set of skills, and you're doing things different, and maybe you're carrying the torch. Maybe you're even on the same team, whatever it might have been, but you're not them. And I think
And
that was a big mistake with that kind of thing in terms of the way a lot of that was played out, because it keeps those characters behind because they're always in the shadow.
yeah. Yeah. And I think, to your point about Batman Beyond, I think that's why Beyond has like garnered this like huge cult following. It's because sure, he's still ultimately taking on the role of Batman, but that whole series, even like my late teens, early 20s watching it, like I didn't feel like Terry was Batman per se. Like Terry was his own persona, his
Yeah,
own
yeah.
thing.
If anything, like
Um,
constantly butting heads with Bruce because he was his own person.
right, right.
But you could
Y-
tell that Bruce, even though he's frustrated, still respects, and if anything, kind of is like, yeah, yeah, you're more like me than you think.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, and then they do that final Justice League Unlimited episode, and you're like,
Oh,
oh, that's really
beautiful.
true.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was a beautiful episode, man.
yeah, man, so
Uh,
good.
Dwayne McDuffie, holy smokes.
I miss that guy.
Immense talent, and I don't think anyone fully realized or appreciated it several years still after he was gone.
Yeah, yeah.
Seeing how many other things have gone so downhill in the way of writing and crafting story. What's up, Joe? Let's see. Spicer says, thanks for answering that question so thoroughly. Is the thought behind 3-issue series is to see what the public likes and then continue that particular series?
In some cases, yeah, and in some cases, no. In some cases, like with the Gods Fear Me, basically, I like, and this is something that I don't really see done with like Android characters. Android characters always fall into the Data territory of like, I'm trying to be human. And there's interesting stuff that you can find in that, but I think it's been done to death. What I wanted to do with Kedzie is show a character that's static as the world around her changes. And that's part of why, the time jump is built in. So I like the idea of like, they get her and Brian, the boy, get separated at the end of book one, and when he comes back into her life, she's still the exact same character. Like, she's programmed to be what she is, and yet here's this kid that's now a man. And what does that do to their relationship? And likewise with some of the crazier stuff that we're going to do with book three. So, in some cases it's built for audience reception, and in some cases it's no. That's kind of the narrative story that I wanted to explore with it.
That's how you structured it purposefully.
Yeah.
Let's see. Jake says, do you know that you have a 5-issue book or a 100-issue book when you start? I think you know. I think you know before you start,
Yeah.
but it depends on what you want to do with it. Because there's easily a way to take something that could be 100 issues and just make a 5-issue story arc and call it a day.
Hmm.
And then there's a way to take that and go, you know what, we're gonna stick around with this character. I'm gonna create more, because to me it all revolves around how many more characters can you create, how many more settings can you put in there, how many more situations can you come up with, and that really determines it.
Yeah, and on my end, like at Chibi, like we have some superhero stuff planned, but not a ton. I love superheroes, but there's a lot of superheroes out there. So if I'm going to do superheroes, I need it to be something that really stands on its own. That said, the two superhero projects that we have, the Red Key, which again hopefully will be sometime next year. Um, sure, that's going to have the 3-issue format, but it's very open ended, and I fully intend to keep producing like basically 3-issue arcs over and over and over again. And it's funny we ended up talking about Batman Beyond because the other project I have in mind, and this would be 25, 26 at the earliest. The other project is kind of a love letter to Batman Beyond. It basically is like, this like noirish postmodern future setting like Batman Beyond, where the old world was full of old heroes, but almost like fantasy or mythology, like that age has passed. And so it would be about a group of kids kind of discovering that world that once was and kind of trying to, bring that superhero light back to this world. And with both of those books, like, I could easily see them being books that I just do forever and ever.
Yeah, they sound like it's a solid enough concept that
Hmm.
you could do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I think that kind of stuff is missing. I think the way that we can do that, it is like what you were talking about in terms of getting that production schedule going, putting out a couple of issues a year, because you can't put out the one issue a year and do an ongoing, because then all of a sudden, 20 issues in, you're like, it's been 20 years.
Right. Right. No, it's
It's
got to be at
it's
least
not quite
4 years.
as impressive.
Right. It's got to at least be 4 a year.
Yeah, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. And either four in a chunk or four of like, one issue at a time,
Yeah.
quarterly campaign.
Yeah.
Jake, yeah, Batman Beyond is underrated. It's what Michael Keaton should be doing in a movie. Yeah, they shouldn't even have done that mess of a movie they did. And it should have just been, I mean, man, it should have just been Batman Beyond with Michael Keaton. And,
Just I love with that Flash movie. I love how you can literally see all the tape, glue, and bubble gum holding it together. Like, you got at no point did you have one solid concrete vision for this story.
crazy. Just crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like I
I, I don't think you even really wanted to make a Flash movie. Like,
yeah, I don't even. It's just like the whole movie, the entire concept was to basically go, let's just make all the movies we've ever done connected.
right.
This way everyone's gonna have to go. Oh, there's like an older Batman. It was such a movie for like the youngins as much as people think it was a nostalgia based movie. It was a
Right.
movie for people that were like, oh, there was old Superman movies. Oh, they matter now though because like they're kind of connected sorta. So
Yeah,
let's go. Oh my
it
lord.
it's so dumb, man. Like, I'm not the
And that Supergirl
I
movie with Helen Slater.
right. My grandfather had a poster of that on his wall. Like it.
Oh man.
I'm not the. I thought it was fine. The Spider-Man multiverse movie that got this whole thing rolling. It was fine, but I guess comparing and contrasting, at least that they were characters and not just reference the movie. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the stuff that they do in the Flash is literally just like, there's a thing that I know. Like, it's like, why is this even happening?
Everything's like a Family Guy cutaway gag.
Exactly. It's like a 2-minute string of that BS.
And honestly, to me, consolidate the budget for both Flash and the Batman with Rob Pattinson. Could have made Batman Beyond. Could have had Rob Pattinson as Terry, and
Yep.
could have had Michael Keaton as Batman as Bruce.
Hmm.
And
And you would have
save
made billions of dollars.
you would have made so much more than both of those made combined. You would have
Yep.
cut your production cost in half. It would have been incredible, and it would have
Hmm.
done the proper service to Michael Keaton's Batman that would have needed
Right.
to be there. And it was, hey, what do we know? We're just comic fans and storytellers.
And as a bonus, you wouldn't have had to trot out Ezra Miller and then very quickly put him back in his box because, oh my God,
Oh,
we can't
good
let this dude
grief.
do any PR.
It's because he was although man, I thought he was the worst thing in those Justice League movies.
Yep.
But it's because I think they thought this guy was going to be a meal ticket because
Mhm.
he was really pushing all like the social justice buttons in some weird way. And then it turned out no, he's just batshit crazy.
He's insane. And then you're like, whoops, he maybe kidnapped a girl for a month. Whoops.
Oopsie daisy. We just were going to build a whole franchise on this guy. He was going to
Right.
be the linchpin of the entire universe. Whoops.
He knocked down a pregnant lady in the Netherlands. Oopsies.
Man, yeah, yeah. Why not make the actual Flashpoint instead of the Drek? Yeah, it's that's something too. And oh my lord, Mike, I can't believe it, man. We
Mm.
this show's already basically done. We already flew through the hour.
I know it was fun, man. I had a good time.
Usually I stop halfway through to do a quick break for a trailer. I'm gonna have to close the show with the trailer, but
Sounds good.
yeah. Give me 15 more minutes. Is that cool with you?
Hey, as long as you need, man.
All right. Just so we can actually have some finality and closure on the conversation. But in terms of and that brings me up to a good point here with what Jake is saying, with what's happening with the films.
Hmm.
What kind of impact do you think the way that comic book movies are playing out right now, which seems to be this weird death spiral that's occurring?
It
How do you
does.
think that's going to impact the comic industry and the indie comics as well?
Okay, so it certainly does seem that way. I mean, people over and over and over again have made the Western analogy, and it certainly could end up going that way. But every time we get a string of stinkers like the Flash or Blue Beetle, like there'll be some superhero movie that makes like all the money in the world. So I think that genre still has a place both in comics and in film. It's just the audience that maybe isn't as keyed in as like the lifers, the every Wednesday crowd. Maybe they're just catching up to where we've been for like 2 or 3 years now, and they're becoming more discerning. I think Hollywood is going to scale a lot of this stuff back because they're taking the wrong lessons, which they always do. Um, they take no money equals people don't like, and it's like, no, it doesn't mean people don't like it. It just means they don't like this, like what you're making. Um, but again, like even in publishing, we see this play out. Like
Oh yeah,
Marvel or DC will do something smart but doesn't earn enough money, and so they just take it as, well, we did the wrong thing. It's like, no, you just maybe wrong time, maybe wrong marketing, whatever, but that doesn't mean the idea was bad.
and
And
conversely, the other way around. Oh, they like Wolverine. Hey, everyone should be just like Wolverine.
right,
They like
we should have
Batman. Everybody should be just like Batman.
right, we should have 40 Wolverines. Like, so yeah, like I think studios both in publishing and film are going to be more discerning. But I'm not a black pill guy. Like, whether we're talking specifically superheroes or just comics in general, like people will buy good stuff. People will buy cool stuff. It's just you have to be really good at marketing. You have to have a smart business plan. And I take, like I've been saying for years, every time that these big guys screw up, like it's just another opportunity for me and people like me. Like I don't take it as a negative. It's like, let them stumble on the big stage. Like I'll catch everyone that they lose.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I couldn't agree more. There really is no true negative to it, as
Hmm.
long as you know how to position yourself properly.
Yeah, I
You know,
mean, people want entertainment, like always. Like people talk about like during the recession, like stuff spikes, and sure, that's true. But I think in general, regardless of how good or bad society is going, like people love entertainment, like I do.
yeah.
you know I still love movies. I still love comics. It's what my entire life is based on.
People always love they love to see in storytelling the opposite of what they see in real life. So if
Sure.
times are bad, they want to see times being good and hopeful, and that
Right.
there's someone righting the wrongs of the world. When times are good, they want to see cautionary tales about
Hmm.
don't give in too much to the good time, because the good time is going to go into a bad time if you give too much into it. People come and take advantage, or you get complacent. So, seeing that play out as well. If we
Hmm.
see a time of hopelessness, we want to see more hope in our storytelling. And I think if
Right.
people respond accordingly with those kinds of stories, I think they'll see the proper impact. The worst thing that I ever see is when people go, art and storytelling should always mirror and reflect what's occurring.
No,
Man, that's depressing.
I know. Oh God, my favorite was the argument that they came up with whatever update they had of like, well, even not taking a political stance is a political stance. I'm like, don't try to like round robin me. Like I meant what I said. Like no,
Yeah, yeah. It's like you're stuck in Wonderland, you
right.
know? It's the craziest thing, but it's yeah, exactly. It's a good way to convince you and gaslight you
Right.
of your apolitical statement is the most political thing ever said.
It's like, no, it really is. I just want to make a dumb book about like super guys punching the piss out of each other. That's all that I want. Like
Yeah,
it
I'm
doesn't.
sure it's just an allegory for Democrats versus Republicans,
Of
isn't it?
course, of course, of course, of course, it is.
And that's the thing, is that people project their own views upon these things, and that's also what makes storytelling and art resonate and so timeless, because people will do that, you know. But that's on you. That's not on
Yeah.
the creator and their intention. It rarely is it the intention of the individual that's creating anything, whether it's a
Hmm.
song, a movie, a book, whatever.
Right.
To manage to somehow tap in to how every single person is going to perceive this work of art
Yeah.
in such a personal way based on their own experience and perspective. I mean, wow, this isn't a story made by a human being. We're talking about words from God. This is an omniscient person here.
Yeah, and you know, to go back to your main point with all this, like I think part of the problem is we have an entire generation of creatives, and I'm not trying to make a blanket statement. Obviously, there are exceptions, but I think we have a generation of creatives who are pessimistic to a fault, and so that the logic of like, okay, well, things are pretty grim right now, like especially now, like they've been grim for like 5 6 years straight. um Instead of giving the audience what they know in their hearts that they want, like people want something optimistic, something to look up to, something hopeful, because they're too entrenched in their worldview and they're too narcissistic. They just keep pumping negativity and just keep pumping gasoline onto the fire. So again, to go back to it, it's like, okay, well then I'll be the creator that does give the audience what they want, because I'm interested in those stories too. Something positive, something hopeful.
Yeah, yeah. The craziest thing I ever saw was a couple of years ago when everything was starting to kick off with the madness within comics, and
Hmm.
they called what you just said. They called that fan service,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's so disgusting that you want to get fan service. You're
It's so
pandering
disgusting that
to
you
the
want to make people
fan.
happy.
It's like, what? But then meanwhile, so your version of storytelling would be considered pandering, yet
Right.
you purposefully are either repurposing characters or coming up with a character that's supposed to appeal to a specific individual based on shared superficialities,
Right, right.
and that's called representation
Yeah,
and great storytelling. That's not called pandering.
right. That's not pandering to you and like 15 other people, all of which you know. Like,
In
that's
such a
not pandering.
disgusting way too. Holy
Yeah,
smokes. That's literally saying like, hey, this person I made them look like you or have some other kind of trait that's similar to what you would have. Don't you guys all just think alike?
right.
Why wouldn't you
Yeah.
just like this character? This is
I
you.
mean, what was the whole thing with Ironheart back in the day? Like that writer's friend started the campaign to get her to write the book because they had the same haircut. And you're like, oh my goodness, what are
And
you talking about?
it sounds like satire and crazy things, but it's not.
No,
It's
no,
and yeah.
we lived through this, man.
Yeah, yeah, it's the weirdest stuff. It's so strange. It's very strange to see storytelling turned into this kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And but yeah, you are 100% right that when you see people and companies or whatever it is creating a certain thing, and you don't think that they're giving the audience what they would want,
Mm.
the best, if not only, true solution is to go out there and try to give the audience what they want.
Sure.
I think too often we kind of see people that think they can make the change from within the system, and unless you have power within the system, you cannot make change within the system. You
Right.
could be, whatever part of it, it's not going to happen. You have to be at the top because these orders are coming from top and then going down.
Hmm.
But in the indie sphere, where we're all grassroots, everything is bottom up. So it's basically, we're listening to the readers out there. We got our ears to the ground of like, okay, people seem to really like this kind of a thing. Or when I'm making this sort of a book, they're engaged with this kind of theme, this kind of character, whatever.
Hmm.
And you're able to then kind of move things along accordingly. But that's where I think we have strength over where they don't. I think that's where we as creators were able to pivot, maybe not instantaneously, but a hell of a lot quicker than what
Absolutely.
the bigger companies are able to do. I mean, even the fact too that you've been doing this for a couple of years and you're already like got to pivot in a way
Hmm.
because I'm learning from what we did right, what we did wrong, and I want to do more of what we did right, and I want to do way less, if not, eliminate altogether what we did wrong. And you have the ability to be able to do that in a relatively quick amount of time, whereas maybe that takes 10 or 15 years sometime on a
Right.
bigger corporate level.
Yeah. I mean, like this stumble with Deepwell again. Like, thankfully, most of our audience has been understanding. But I always say like every book is a growing process. Like I've learned like from where we started with Samurai, like I've learned so much about like what it is to be a publisher, and yeah, man, I don't know, like I try to be pretty optimistic. I can be pessimistic at times, but I try not to fall too into that because ultimately it's like you're just going to make yourself miserable, and then that just leads to everyone around you being miserable. So like
Yeah, yeah,
learn from every mistake and just keep going, right? Like what am I going to do? Stop?
absolutely. Yeah, that's the only other alternative. Is either you make works of misery that continue to make you and everyone around you miserable,
Right.
and you stop, because eventually you do realize and have that moment of clarity where you're like, why am I doing that? I'm miserable.
Yeah, man.
Or you do just stop completely and find something else to do.
Yeah, like I mean, real quick, like I consider it so fortunate that like I'm a child of the 80s because everyone talks about the image boom as like the starting point for like the independent revolution and all that, and it's like no, man, like the start of that was I'm 6 years old and my dad puts like the trade collection of Eastman and Laird's turtles in my hand, and like I that light bulb goes off of like, oh, like this is just two guys, like this isn't Marvel, this isn't DC, this is
Yeah,
just
there's no
two
Marvel or
guys.
DC in the corner. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like 6, 7 years old, I had that realization. And so I never had that moment of like, oh, I need a publisher or a studio to do what I want to do. Like it's always just been, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. That's a great point. And I think there's a lot of us out there that maybe attribute too much of that independent boom maybe to the image guys. It was cool at the time seeing them go off, and it was
Of
exciting
course.
and crazy. But yeah, I think without us even realizing it, Ninja Turtles was absolutely
Yeah,
our
for sure,
first
man.
experiences with, oh yeah, indie comics. But you
Yeah,
didn't
I
know at
mean,
the time really it was indie comics.
right. I mean, it became this empire, but like the fact still remains, it's just those guys.
Yeah, and I think that to this day has more of an impact on the corporate comic industry than
Hmm.
what the image guys did.
Yeah.
Because what the image guys did to me, and I said we would be wrapping up around now, but man, we got to do another 5 minutes. To me, what the image guys did, it was impactful. But when they dropped the ball after the first couple of years, if they didn't, I
Right.
think we would have saw Marvel and DC buckle into having a creator-owned imprint or
Hmm.
offering more of a creator incentive.
I
But
agree,
when
man.
they buckled, and then they made their own mistakes trying to catch up to some of what Image was doing, it really put the industry in a tailspin. But
Right.
I think they always were looking over at what Ninja Turtles did, what they accomplished, and then remembering if we can get into TV and movies and toys and do that in a big way, we can secure our spot. And then once they had that, Toy Biz, Hasbro, etc., with what had happened with that,
Mm-hmm.
I think they figured this was it. This was where our money is now. It's the merchandising, it's the shows, it's the movies.
Right.
We can't ever let another Ninja Turtles rise again.
Exactly.
So like Walking Dead, total fluke. And if
Yeah.
Walking Dead doesn't come along, I don't even know where the hell Image Comics is right now.
I know, right?
Yeah. So, and then that was a kick in the nards for the big two as well, of like, oh man, Walking Dead, we let another Ninja Turtles happen.
Mm-hmm.
But every single time when people are like, they buy up shelf space and they do these things and they do that, the other stuff, and they're putting out all this garbage. Yeah, they'll put out books that just have a cover and nothing in them, just to keep you off the shelf, because
Right.
they're not competing and worrying about you on the shelf. They're worried about what if this takes off, catches fire, and now we have to contend with them as a show, as a toy, as a movie. Now all of a sudden, what would we do with 10 or 20 of these guys?
Right.
That's eating up our market share.
It's almost like we'll have competition.
Yes, yeah, and it starts at the ground level. It's making sure it's killing baby Hitler. And making sure that he never becomes adult Hitler. And that's what they're doing to all this is the worst analogy in the world, but that's what they're doing
Just keep going. Keep going.
to all the indie comics out there. Yeah. They're killing us as babies, so that we don't grow up to become competing adults. But now all of a sudden people have sidestepped, and now we're all doing the crowdfunding, direct selling, places where they can't really touch. And if they were to venture into those avenues, because some people go, well, what if they start doing crowdfunding? What if Marvel, DC start doing crowdfunding, or whoever? That is not something their corporations want to see happen. Their corporate owners are going to look at that and go, what the hell are we doing? Crowdfunding?
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, when we get to that point, which is weird in a way, because like you kind of sort of starting to see it with stuff like Boom, with their they've had several campaigns at this point, like the Power Rangers thing, the whole thing with Keanu Reeves, like that's the industry's heading down this road. It's weird, man.
Yeah, and I think the biggest reason that you're going to see more of those indie level companies utilize that is because of the fact that they don't have to get that stamp of approval from a big papa corporate,
right?
To go, so you're gonna do a Kickstarter for your graphic novel? This is strange.
Yeah.
Like they can't wrap, because if they did understand and wrap their head around crowdfunding and understand the tremendous tool it could be, and this is the thing that's so funny to me about the writer's strike and the actor strike. There is crowdfunding in a big way. Go get your stuff made. Go put it through. Go put it in front of people. Go option up independent talents that are putting out stuff. If you don't have the ideas there, but you think like, oh, that idea sounds great, I want to option it and then turn that into a film. Who needs the studio system? You have something better than the studio system. It's called the customer audience system.
Yeah, and look, not to get off on a whole other thing, but like that whole union deal is just weird to me, because like, okay, fine, so you want to strike against the system, I get that, but when you then turn around and tell the people that you're supposedly championing, and you can't do anything on your own that would make you money, because we wouldn't be getting a cut of that. I'm like, but they could be acting in plays. They could be producing stuff on YouTube or like small platforms like that on their own.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It boggles the mind. It boggles the mind. Yeah.
Yep.
It's I mean, hell, look at us. We're independently creating things. You don't need to be a part of some big studio system or to be in a union or to do whatever.
Right.
To just create and get stuff out there. And then especially, what better way to stick it to them, to the studios that have allegedly been screwing you over or whatever,
Right.
than to turn around and say, yeah, the millions upon millions that you paid me over the years to make you rich, but you made me rich in the process. I'm going to turn that around and become a mini studio of myself and
Yeah.
put stuff out.
Like,
I
could you
don't need
imagine?
you.
Could you imagine if, like, Taylor Sheridan, the Yellowstone dude, like, if he just said, "Hey, I'm going to crowdfund my own, like, 3-part miniseries," and it pulled in like 30-40 million dollars, like, what kind of a middle finger would that be to the entire Hollywood system? Like, at
Yeah.
what point is it like, I just don't even need you guys?
Yeah. Yeah. I really, to me, there's like and then the whole kind of thing where they're throwing about that they're kind of being either ripped off, or there's maybe even a breach of contract in terms of AI usage of likeness and voice and this and that. To me, that's not strike, that's lawsuit.
Right, right.
like you're striking it. That's how it should be happening. Like,
Yeah,
if they're
yeah.
doing this and that's against your agreements, that's lawsuit territory. That's the unions suing then the studios. So to me, the whole thing is it's strange. It's so
It is.
strange, and yeah, if there is a legitimacy behind any of it in terms of what's happening, and if anything, the war of attrition between the two of them, the studio system is going to outlast the actors and the writers. But in terms of the other war of attrition of creativity, AI is only going to take the studios so far. And if the writers and actors actually want to kind of do something that's outside of the system, then they have to actually get outside the system
Yeah.
and put some investment into themselves. If they think that they're so great, prove it. You
Right.
know, and so that's what's so it's so odd, especially being, and you probably feel this way too, being an independent creative, just sitting there being like, you know, if I go on strike today, I just don't work. I just don't
Right.
get paid.
I'm just gonna hang out on my couch.
Yeah, like you're outside your house, you know, striking against yourself for better treatment,
Right.
and it's
Just telling my followers on Twitter I want to treat myself better. Like,
yeah. So, and then for the audiences to even go residuals, you know, I get it, but at the same time, I really don't, because if I don't work, I don't get paid. You know, so
right.
the mass audience that's out there is like, you know, let's say you work at a potato chip factory. I'm not getting paid in perpetuity or whatever for all the potato chips that get eaten just because I worked at the factory that year.
Right. Right.
So
exactly.
most people are like, I can't really relate to what your struggle is. So when they're going out there and they're doing the picket sign thing, and it with oddly enough always like big smiles on, which
Yeah.
I'm like,
Exactly.
why are you big smiling at a strike? To me, there's seriousness, you know. But yeah, it's a very strange thing, very strange. But like you said, it's an opportunity for independent creatives, comic creators, filmmakers, actors, whatever, that are outside of the system and have been outside the system doing it this way, to swoop in and take advantage of that.
Dude, that's what I said the first day of the writer's strike, and I said it again when the actors joined in. I'm like, if you're not a part of either of these unions and you're trying to get yourself noticed, like, just get a couple friends and start putting up like short episodes of whatever on a YouTube channel. Like, just start producing content. It has to be good, but like, just start producing content, because like, you are going to quickly become the one source of entertainment for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Get out there, you know,
Yeah.
shoot your shot. And,
Literally.
yeah, and all the people that are always, that's what I find so funny. All the people that are saying, you know, that's kind of like scab-like mentality. All I could think is, okay, so let's pretend the strike is over. None of you guys ever compete for jobs.
Right.
Like, Hollywood is ruthless.
Yeah, I know.
Ruthless.
Like, Hollywood is just this magical place. It's like, have you ever seen Babylon? Like, oh my god.
They've literally killed people sometime because things got in the way of a deal.
Right.
Now all of a sudden it's kumbaya, sunshine, and rainbows.
Right, but they're just going to welcome you in with your YouTube channel, right?
It's like, oh man, oh man. Mike, it's been a blast, brother. What a great conversation. We covered so many different bases here. We really dove into not just what you're doing, the state of the comic industry, the future of it, touched upon a little bit of the past. Just a beautifully comprehensive conversation, man. What a blast.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody in the chat, I got Mike's YouTube channel in the description of the show. If you guys want to go subscribe, hit it up. And do you have anything like a website or anything to direct people to? You have anything currently funding right now?
No, not currently funding. Once Deepwell is off to print, we're going to do a second chance campaign right before fulfillment starts. But other than that, like our next big launch is going to be the Gods Fear Me 2. So I guess just for the time being, you can follow me on Chibi_Mike at Twitter, and that's where I constantly update everything about our publishing.
Absolutely great, man. That's awesome. Thank you so much, everybody in the chat. Thank you guys too, Mike. Thank you once again. I will be back tomorrow night. I'm gonna have I'm gonna be talking about King Cryptid, but also having open lines. So if anybody wants to just hop in, maybe talk about their project or what they're doing or anything, it's on their mind, comic book related or otherwise, please feel free to join the show. I'll be back tomorrow night, 9 o'clock. And then I've got a guest on Friday at 9 o'clock Eastern time. I've got Vaughn Klaus on the channel. So Vaughn, nice. It's always fun talking to him. And we'll probably have some kind of paranormal type talk. It's always fun to talk paranormal stuff with Vaughn.
Of course.
Are you into any kind of paranormal weirdness at all?
I mean, in terms of fiction, yeah. Like, I mean, horror is my bag, man. Like, it's my favorite genre. But I mean, if you're talking the whole like Ghost Hunters thing, like Zach Baggin, like.
Well, more like I don't know, like alien secret societies, ancient civilizations, anything that would be like featured on like Ancient Aliens. And the only reason I ask is because I have like a Paranormal Pete kind of a thing. Where I do deep dives into stuff and we have conversations. So if you're interested or well versed in that kind of stuff, if there's any specific thing like Bigfoots or whatever, that kind of thing.
I'm interested, man. I'll listen to anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you ever like Pete, I'm really into whatever it is. I don't care. Crop circles, remote viewing. I don't give a crap. If you're into it and you want to talk about it, shoot me up one day and I can have you back on to talk about that stuff too.
Yeah, ancient civilizations, man.
That's always a great topic.
Yeah, that's
so
my
much
bag.
to discuss. I'll have to have you back. But
right,
yeah, thank you guys so much. Appreciate you guys being here. And again, Mike, thank you, man. Give my best to Selena. And
I will.
Yeah, and I'll talk to you soon, man.
Thanks, man. Later.
Yeah, no problem. Everybody, take it easy. Have a great night, and see you tomorrow.